All right, welcome back, guys. So in this video, we're going to see how to deal with addresses now. So we're going to see how we can manage addresses inside of our app with our database, and also how we can have an address attached to a customer in the vault of Braintree. So that's what we're going to go ahead and tackle, as well as I also want to fix up this homepage a little bit. So maybe that's the first thing I'm going to do, just make the homepage look a little nicer. And then after that, we're going to deal with addresses. So let's go ahead and first deal with this homepage. The first thing I want to do is I want to bring in an image inside of my assets. So I'm going to have inside of my front end folder, inside of my source, I'm going to make a brand new folder, which I'm going to call assets. And then inside of here, I'm going to make another folder called images. And then inside of here, I'm going to bring in an image of headphones, because that's what we're going to be selling on this website. So right here in my Finder window, I have downloaded an image of headphones, and I'm going to give you guys a resource link that you can click on if you want the exact same image that I'm using. So right now it's inside of my downloads folder, and I'm just going to drag it into where the appropriate folder is. So inside of my front end, and then source, and then assets, and then images. So this is where I'm going to bring that in, and now I can close this up. So now if I check out my assets images, I have this headphones file now. So this is what I'm going to be using. And again, I'll give you guys a download link that you can click on, and then you can download the same image as myself. So with that, let's now close this up, open up our containers, home, and let's start making this look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to close that side window. Also, I just want to point out that I have my back end and my front end running, so make sure you're doing the same. And then first thing I'm going to do is just import that image I just created. So I'm going to import, and I'm going to call this headphones. That's going to come from my assets, images, and then headphones.jpg. And then I'm going to add some styling to this H1. I'm going to put a class name of display-4, put a little bit of margin at the top just so that this homepage isn't hugging the top of this nav bar so closely. And then instead of saying homepage, I'll put in mini shop. And then below this, I'll have an H2. That will have a class name of font size-4, just to make the font size a little larger. Do font weight light, just to make the text a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to make it italic with FST-italic. And then put some margin at the top just to space out this H1 and H2. And then this will say where you can buy the world's greatest headphones. So let's see how that looks. So we see that this is italicized. We have that light font weight, and it's looking pretty good. So let's go back. And then below this, I want to have some kind of Jumbotron. So I'm going to have a div. I'm going to give this a class name. Now, we don't have a Jumbotron class inside of Bootstrap 5, so instead I'm just going to use utility classes. Going to put some margin above that H2. Going to make a background light, put some padding around everything, have rounded edges, and have a box shadow. And then inside of here, I'm going to have an H3 with the class name of display-6. And then this is just going to say, check out our Unreal headphones. Or maybe I'll do headphones set. So check out our Unreal headphones set. And then below this, I'm going to have a paragraph with a class name, which is going to be lead. Put some margin at the top, put some margin at the bottom. And then I'm going to have some text here, and it's going to say most ergonomic and highest sound quality headphones in the world. And then below this, I'm going to have a link. So I have to also make sure I import link. So I'm going to import link. And this will be coming from React router DOM. And then this link tag, I'm going to style. So I'm going to give it a class name of button-info. And then have a shadow, which is going to be a small shadow. And then as for the text, it's going to say, I want these headphones. So let's take a look at how this looks. So there we are. We have the button with this button styling, and then we also need to make sure that this directs us to the checkout page. So I'm also going to put the to property here, and that's going to go to /checkout. So now when I go ahead and click this, I'll be redirected to this checkout page. So let's go back and finish up the styling. So below this Jumbotron div, I'm going to have another div. It's going to have a class name of row. I'm going to have some margin at the top and bottom. And then inside of here, I'm going to have two rows. So I'm going to have a div with a class name of call-3. This is where that image is going to be. And then I'm also going to have another row. So I'm going to style this with offset-2 call-7. Just have some spacing between these two columns. And then this one's going to be the call-7. So it's going to be a little bit wider. So we're going to have like the image, a little bit of spacing. And then on the right, we're going to have a list with some features of these headphones. So first I'm going to start with the image. So I'm going to use an image tag. So this will be a self-closing tag. I'm going to pass a class name of image fluid. This will make it a responsive image. I'm going to have the source, which is going to be headphones, which is what we imported right over here. And then I'm also going to pass some alt text to this. And it's just going to say mini shop headphones. And then below here, I'm going to have my unordered list. So it's going to be a UL. I'm going to pass some styling to this. And I'm going to pass list-group, list-group -flush, and empty-5. And I'm going to have some list items. So I'm going to have list-group-item, font size -4, and lead, just to make the text look nice. And then our first feature is going to be insane comfort. And then I'm going to have a couple more features. So I'm just going to copy this list item, paste below. And in total, we're going to have 5 different features. So I'm going to copy this down a couple more times, just so that we have 5 list items. And then this next one is going to be greatest sound quality. The next one is going to be Bluetooth compatible. And then I'm going to have size adjustable. And then I'm going to have noise canceling. And I'm actually going to have one more. So we're going to have 6 total rather than 5. And then the last one's going to be built-in microphone. So built-in microphone. I'm going to save that, and let's check this out. So there we are. We have the headphones here. We have all the different features. So our homepage is now looking much more proper. So now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and now deal with the address functionality. So I'm going to close up this home.js, open up my side window, go into my backend, payment, models.py, and I'm going to work on a brand new model now. So this is going to be for my address. I'll close up that side window, make a brand new class, which I'm going to call address. Pass in models.model, just so we extend this functionality. And then these addresses are going to link to a customer. So I'm going to have a customer field, which is going to be models.foreignkey. And then customer. And then on delete is going to be models.cascade. So that way, if the customer that this is linking to gets deleted, this address also gets deleted. And we can also have multiple addresses pointing to a single customer, hence why we have the foreign key. So the next thing I'm going to have is the address ID, because every single address in Braintree is going to have an ID. So we also want to have a record of that here in our database. So I'm going to do models.character field, and I'm going to have a max length of 2, because in Braintree, these address IDs are going to be 2 characters in length. And then I'm going to have the street address. It's going to be models.character field. And here I'm going to have a max length, which is going to be 255. And then I'm going to have a couple more character fields. So to make this easier, I'm just going to copy this models.character field, and I'm going to create the rest of these fields now. So below the street address, I'll have city, which is going to be that models.character field, and I'll have max length of 255 again. Then I'm going to have the country, which is also going to be a character field with max length of 255. I'm going to have state_province, which is also going to be a character field. And then finally, we're going to have our postal zip code. And that will once again be our character field, except in this case, I'm going to have a max length of say 9, just to make it a little less. And then I'm also going to have the string representation of this model here. So I'm going to define _str_, pass in self, and I'm going to return self.address ID. So this string representation, this is what we're going to see this model represented as inside of our admin panel. So then speaking of our admin panel, let's also open up our admin.py, bring in this address model. And then I'm also going to do a site register on the address. That way we can see it inside of our admin panel. So right now, if I go back here and open this up, refresh. So I'm logged into my admin account right now, and I see this customers and this addresses now because I just registered the addresses. All right, so let's go back to the code now. So I don't need this, and I don't need this. And because I created a new model, I have to make migrations now. So I'm going to stop running my backend. I'm going to clear. Do a Python manage.py make migrations, and then I'm going to do a Python manage.py migrate. So there we are, and now I can rerun my server. And I'm going to close up this terminal. So the next area I want to work now is inside of my views.py, and I'm going to close up that side window. And then we want to go inside of this process payment view and start implementing our address logic. So because we just created a new model, let's also import it in this file. So I'm going to bring it into here. And let's go take a look at what we have so far in our process payment view. So we already have all the logic in place for accepting these different pieces of data, like the street address, the city, country, state, province, postal zip code, and then also our nonce, which we're going to use later. And then here we had some logic so that we have this country name and country code. And then we have all the logic for our customer. So if our customer exists, then we're just going to retrieve the customer. Otherwise, we're going to create the customer. And then after this logic, so I want to make sure I have this on the correct line. So right here we have this if else, and I want to have this next logic on the exact same line. So what I want to see right now is if the address that the customer is passing, is this an address that already exists? So that's the first thing I'm going to check. So I'm going to check if address.objects.filter, and we're going to filter by quite a number of properties. To make this easier, I can open up my models.py here, and then I can grab all these fields, and then I'm just going to edit this appropriately. So I'm going to paste this all between here, and then fix up the indenting. And then the first thing I want to filter by is the customer. So it's going to be customer equals customer. That's the first thing I want to check for. So this customer we have reference to previously. So we have it either right here or right here. So whether the customer already exists or it doesn't, we will have a record of that. Then this address ID, this is something that we're not going to be passing into here because we don't really know off the bat what this is. So we don't need to filter by this field here. But the street address is something we do want to filter by. So I'm going to pass that. And then the city is something we want to filter by. So I'm going to set equals city. Then the country is another thing I want to filter by. And then in this case, I'm going to put country name. Because this country name, if we go up, we had those if checks. And then this is going to be equal to either Canada or United States. So this is the way that we're storing it inside of our database. And then this state province is another field. And then finally, we have the postal zip code. So we're going to filter by all these fields, and we're going to check if this address exists. And then if it does, we're going to proceed. Otherwise, we're going to continue with our other logic for if it does not exist. So first, let's handle if it does exist. So if it exists, then we're going to go ahead and retrieve it from our database. So we can do that with address.object.get. And then we want to get with all of these fields here. So we want to get the address where customer is equal to customer, street address is equal to street address, and so forth with the rest of these fields. And then I also want to store this value in a variable, which I'm going to call address. And the next thing I want to do is grab the address ID of this address, and I'm going to store that in a variable, which I call address ID. So that's going to come from address.addressID, because once again, in this model, we're storing this address ID in this value, which we call address ID. So this is how I can retrieve it. So right here. And then after that, I want to see if this address with this ID exists inside of our Braintree vault. So that's going to be the next step. So the way that I can do that is with gateway.address.find, and then I can pass the customer ID and the address ID. So then if this ends up succeeding, then that means that this address linked to this customer exists. And then this customer ID is something we have reference to. So right over here, we grab reference to it, and then we also grab reference to it right over here. So this is something we have access to. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the result of this to this here, and then I'm going to wrap all of this inside of a try except, just in case if something goes wrong. And then in the except part, if this does not succeed, then what we're going to do is we're going to create this address. And then after we create the address in Braintree, we're going to make sure to update our address ID of the address stored in our database to the correct value that we just created. So that's if this right here fails. So maybe this will fail if someone for some reason deletes this address inside of the Braintree vault. So now I'm going to do gateway.address.create. So this is how you can create an address in Braintree. Then I'm going to have a set of curly braces, and then in here, I'm going to pass a couple different values. So I can have customer underscore ID. This is going to be my customer ID, so that we're linking this to the correct customer. I'm going to have the first name, which is going to be first name. This is something that we're receiving right over here. So then back down, I'm going to have a couple more properties. I'm going to have the street address. And then this is going to be our street address variable. And then we're going to have the city. So in Braintree, this is locality. And then this is going to be equal to our city. So this is what it's referred to as when we're creating this address in Braintree. And then we're going to have the state or the province. And then this in Braintree is referred to as a region. So make sure you do region here. Then we're going to pass our state province. Then the next value is going to be our postal zip code. So in Braintree, this is going to be postal code. So here we can pass postal underscore zip underscore code. And then we're going to have the country name, which is going to be country name. And then we can also pass another value, which is country code alpha 2. So this is going to be the country code, and it's going to be specifically the alpha 2 version, which is with 2 characters, like we're doing if we go to the top with that if check where we have CA or US. So this is the alpha 2 format. And you can also look at this in the Braintree documentation. They have other formats as well. I specifically want to use the alpha 2 format. So that's what I'm using here. And then this right here is going to be my country code, because once again, this is something that we created right here at the top. So now with that, this is going to go ahead and now create this address. So the next thing I want to do is see if this was successful. So I could do that by storing, first of all, the result of this in a variable, which I'm going to call result. Then I can check if result.isSuccess. That means this was successful. So then I want to make sure this is an if check. And I'm also going to have an else case if this was not successful. So first, let's handle the case where it was successful. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the address ID, and I'm going to store it in a variable, which I'm going to call address ID. And then I'm going to wrap all of this in a string function. And then I can grab the address ID from result.address.id. And then after that, I can then update my address that's inside of my database. So I can do that with address.objects.filter. And I want to filter by all of these different properties that we were filtering by before. So I'm going to copy them, paste them in here, fix up the indenting. So we want to filter by the customer, the street address, city, country, state, province, and then the postal zip code. And then I can do a dot update. And also make sure you do a dot filter here and not a dot get. Otherwise, you can't do this update. And then inside of the update, the only thing I'm going to update is the address ID. I'm going to set that equal to this address ID, where I'm grabbing this ID from the newly created address. So this is in the case where we failed to retrieve this address. So we had some address stored in our database, but in the vault, it ended up getting deleted in Braintree. So we're going to recreate this address and then update the value that we have inside of our database. So that's what's going on here. And then if this happens to fail for whatever reason, then we're just going to return an error response. So I'm going to return a response, and I'm going to have an error. And it's going to say address invalid, something like that. And I'm going to have a status that I pass, which is going to be a status.http 400 bad request. All right, so now we handled this entire block right here, which is the address exists in our database. Now we're going to handle where the address that the user passed inside of that form on the checkout page does not exist in our database. That's this else right over here. So let's now handle this part. So the logical thing to do if the address doesn't exist in our database is we create the address. So first, what I'm going to do is create it in Braintree, and then we're going to see if it's successful. So I'm going to do gateway.address.create, and then we're going to create this. So this is something we've seen already, and that was right over here. So instead of retyping all of this, I can just copy it from this create we did here, and then paste it between here and fix up the indenting. Because once again, we're going to create this based on the customer ID, their first name, the street address, locality, region, the postal code, country name, and the country code alpha 2. And then we're going to store this inside of a variable. That way we can see, was this creation successful? And then once again, we can do that with result.isSuccess. And then here, we're going to make this an if check. And then if this results in true, that means that this creation in Braintree was successful. So in that case, what we can do is create this address in our database. So we can do that with address.objects.create. Then we have to pass all the appropriate values. So you have to pass the customer. And then we also have to pass the address ID. So we need to retrieve that address ID. So I'm going to store that once again in a variable, which is address ID. Wrap everything in the string function. And then I can grab the address ID with result.address.id. Then right over here, we can pass the address ID equal to the address ID. And once again, we're passing all of these values because with our address model, these right here are all the values that are required. So now the next values I'm going to pass are the street address, and then the city, country, state, province, and then the postal zip code. This is stuff that we already have typed out previously. So I'm just going to grab it from here, the street address, city, country, state, province, and then the postal zip code. So I'm going to copy these. And then below the address ID, I'm going to paste these in, fix up the indenting. That way we're passing all the correct values that we need in order to create this address in our database. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to get the address just to make sure that everything went okay with this. So I'm going to do that with address.objects.get. And then I'm going to get based on all of these values right here. And then I'm going to go ahead between here, paste them in. And then I'm going to store the result of this in a variable. So after creating, we're going to do this. And then after that, we're good to go with this success part. And then we're going to have this address so that we can use it later in this if we need it. So now I'm going to handle the else, where this result.isSuccess is false. So in that case, I'm just going to return an error response. So I'm going to return a response where we have an error. And it's just going to say failed to create address. And then I'll have a status, which is going to be status.http 400 bad request. So let's make sure that things are okay inside of our server. So it looks like we have no issues here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to update this so it fits a little better. So created customer and address. I'm going to save that. And then we're going to go ahead and test out that we correctly create this address. So if I go back previously for our customer, we ended up using this johndoe@gmail.com customer. So I'm just going to use this same customer, and then we'll see if everything works appropriately. So back inside of here, I can now click on here, go to my checkout page. We don't have to change anything here because we fully implemented everything. But now in our backend, we have our logic for creating the addresses as well. And then another thing I can do is I can make this look a little nicer here, but because this video is a little long, I'm going to save that for a next video. So for now, let's go ahead, pass in johndoe@gmail.com. I'm going to pass some street address. And then choose my country, then the province, the zip code, and then finally the payment. So currently inside of Braintree, looks like I got logged out, so I'm going to re-log in. And then inside of my vault, I can search for some customers. So here we have this customer of John. And then if I click on him, currently we have no addresses that are attached to this customer. So let's go ahead and make this request. So we're not going to be making any payments yet, but we can test our first two pieces of functionality. So I'm going to place this order, and we'll see if everything works out. So I'm redirected to the thank you page that tells me that everything was in order with this request. I can check out my terminal. So we sent a post request. That was a 201 status code, so everything should have worked out okay. And now if I go ahead, check out my admin panel, go into addresses. Now I have an address created with the ID of 26, and it has all these details that I filled out. So perfect, that's all working appropriately, and it's linked to the correct customer. And if I check on my customers, I still have this one customer, so we didn't touch anything here. So now if I go back to my vault, make sure that I still only have one customer. So I'm going to search. So we still have the one customer. I can click on this customer, and we see the ID of 26 for this address. So the address got created successfully. And let's make sure that all the details in here are also correct. So you have the first name, the address, the locality, so in other words, the city. Then we have the state, province, the postal code, the country name. So perfect. Everything got passed inside of here correctly. So there we are. That's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So now we know how we can create addresses. And then in the next video, we're going to now see how we can deal with payment methods and transactions. So that's going to be an exciting video, and I'll see you guys there.